A decision that changed everything. 20 years ago, in the small town of Maple Creek, Officer John Harris was known as a man of few words and many actions. His patrols were steady, his record impeccable, but beneath his quiet, disciplined exterior, there was a wound that never fully healed, the loss of his wife, Sarah, 10 years prior. John had always been seen as a protector, but in the years since her death, his life had become one of solitude. He had resigned himself to a life of service, never imagining that one decision would not only heal his heart, but also ripple through the lives of many. It was an ordinary evening when the call came in. John was finishing his rounds, his patrol car humming down the nearly empty streets as the sun dipped below the horizon. Dispatch to Unit 47, possible abandonment case at the old McAllister house. Multiple miners reported. John responded instinctively, the sense of duty pushing him forward, though he had no idea how this call would change his life forever. As he arrived at the scene, the sight before him was heartbreaking. 6 young girls, ranging in age from 2 to 12, huddled together on the worn-out porch of the dilapidated house. Their faces were a mix of confusion and fear, eyes searching for answers, safety, or maybe just someone to care. The air around them was cold, and John's heart clenched. The girls had been left alone after their parents had tragically passed in a car accident, with no extended family willing to take them in. The social worker's words echoed in John's mind as she explained the bleak reality they were facing: separation, foster care, a life where family and security would be luxuries. In that moment, John's protective instinct kicked in. He couldn't stand the thought of these sisters being torn apart, lost in a system where love was rare and stability even rarer. Without hesitation, John made a decision that surprised even him. "I'll take them," he said, his voice steady, though his heart was pounding in his chest. The social worker, Karen, blinked at him in shock. "Officer Harris, are you sure? These girls need more than just a temporary solution. They need a permanent home. That's a huge responsibility." "I know," John replied, his voice soft but firm. "But I can't let them go through that. They need each other. They need someone to look out for them." The road ahead would not be easy. The adoption process was grueling, filled with questions about John's capability to raise 6 girls, all of whom were black, in a town where multiracial families were not common. John, a white man, would face criticism and cultural challenges he hadn't anticipated, but none of that mattered when he looked into the girls' eyes. He was determined to be their father, building a family in a divided world. As the paperwork and processes slowly moved forward, John found himself navigating uncharted territory. Overnight, his house transformed from a quiet sanctuary to a bustling home filled with 6 vibrant, distinct personalities. While John had grown accustomed to handling emergencies, traffic stops, and community disputes, parenting 6 girls was a whole new world. The girls, Amara, Mia, Leela, Tessa, Jada, and baby Zoe, each carried their own emotional baggage. The grief from losing their parents was palpable, and the transition to a new home, especially with a man they barely knew, added layers of fear, confusion, and mistrust. Despite the smiles and hugs that John offered, they struggled to adjust. Amara, the eldest at 12, took on a maternal role. She had always been protective of her younger sisters, and that role became even more pronounced in this new environment. John could see the weight on her young shoulders, and he wanted desperately to ease her burden. However, Amara wasn't easily convinced that John's intentions were genuine. One evening, after the other girls had gone to bed, Amara found John sitting at the kitchen table, sifting through bills. She hesitated in the doorway before stepping forward. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John looked up, startled by the directness of her question. He set the bills aside and met her gaze. "Doing what, sweetheart?" "Taking us in," she clarified, her arms crossing defensively. "We're not your responsibility. You don't even know us." John leaned back in his chair, sensing that this conversation was one he needed to handle with care. "Amara, I may not have known you before, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you now. When I saw you and your sisters that day, something inside me told me that I couldn't let you go through this alone." She frowned, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "But we're not like you. We don't belong here. People look at us funny, like we don't fit." John's heart sank. He had noticed the glances, the whispered comments from neighbors, even the overt racism from a few in town. It was the harsh reality of raising 6 black girls in a predominantly white, small-town community. The girls felt it, and so did he. "You belong here just as much as anyone else," John said firmly. "This is your home now. I know things won't always be easy, but I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you feel safe and loved." Amara's expression softened, but she still seemed hesitant. "What if we don't fit in? What if we never do?" John stood and walked over to where she stood, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to fit in with everyone else. You just need to be yourselves. That's enough. And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, they'll have to answer to me." Amara didn't respond immediately, but John could see the wheels turning in her mind. Slowly, she nodded, and for the first time since the adoption, he saw a glimmer of trust in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A multiracial family in Maple Creek. As the weeks turned into months, John's life was filled with a newfound sense of purpose. There were school drop-offs, dentist appointments, and hair appointments, especially the hair appointments. John had never realized how complicated caring for black hair could be. Amara had to teach him about the importance of protective styles, moisturizing, and using the right products. One Saturday morning, John decided to try his hand at doing Tessa's hair. She had asked for box braids, and John, never one to shy away from a challenge, thought he could manage it after watching a few YouTube tutorials. "Are you sure you can do it, Dad?" Tessa asked, her eyes wide with both excitement and skepticism. John chuckled. "I've been watching the videos. How hard can it be?" An hour later, with half-done braids sticking out in every direction, both John and Tessa were laughing hysterically. It was clear that hair braiding was not one of John's hidden talents. "You tried, Dad," Tessa said between giggles. "But maybe we should call Miss Carla next time." Miss Carla was one of the few black women in town, and she had offered to help John with the girls' hair. John had been too proud to ask at first, but after this experiment, he knew he'd have to swallow that pride. Miss Carla became a mentor of sorts, helping John navigate the unique challenges of raising black girls in a predominantly white town. She taught him about cultural pride, shared stories of her own experiences, and helped the girls find a sense of identity amidst the ignorance and prejudice they faced. Facing prejudice head-on. Maple Creek wasn't known for being openly hostile, but it was a place where differences were noticed, often unkindly. John quickly became aware of the biases that ran beneath the surface. It started subtly. Other parents pulling their children away from his daughters on the playground, whispered comments at the grocery store, cold stares at town events. But then, there were more direct incidents. One day, as John and the girls were leaving a local diner, a man approached them. He glanced at John, then at the girls, a sneer spreading across his face. "Officer Harris," he said mockingly, "didn't know you were running a daycare for charity cases." John's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Amara stepped forward, her back straight, eyes blazing with defiance. "We're not charity cases," she said sharply. "We're family." The man laughed, clearly amused by the girl's boldness. "Family, huh? Don't see how that's possible." John stepped forward then, his voice calm but laced with warning. "These are my daughters. You have a problem with that." The man faltered, clearly not expecting John to defend them so fiercely. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, but the damage had been done. The girls, especially Amara, felt the sting of that encounter for days afterward. At home, John gathered them around the dinner table, their faces somber as they picked at their food. "I know that what happened today wasn't fair," John began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I know this isn't the first time you've had to deal with something like that. But I want you to remember something. You're not defined by what ignorant people think of you. You're smart, strong, and capable. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Amara, always the most vocal, looked up from her plate. "It's just hard sometimes, Dad. People look at us like we don't belong." John reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I know, honey, but you do belong. And anyone who can't see that doesn't matter. We're a family, and we stand together." It was a moment that solidified the bond between John and the girls. They might not fit the mold of a typical family in Maple Creek, but they were family nonetheless. The girls find their own paths. As the years passed, the girls began to grow into their own. Amara, who had once been so guarded, flourished into a strong-willed teenager with dreams of becoming a lawyer. She wanted to fight for families like hers, to make sure that no one would ever have to go through what she and her sisters had faced. Maya and Leela became inseparable, both excelling in sports, especially track. They quickly made names for themselves as two of the fastest girls in the state, earning scholarships and recognition from colleges around the country. Tessa, always the creative one, found her voice in music. She could often be found strumming a guitar on the front porch or writing lyrics in her journal. Her songs spoke of love, loss, and the beauty of finding a home in unexpected places. Jada, the quietest of the group, was a genius in the making. She breezed through her schoolwork, often tutoring her sisters and classmates, and had big dreams of going to medical school one day. And Zoe, the baby of the family, grew into a talented artist. Her sketches covered the walls of John's home, each one more intricate and beautiful than the last. Zoe's art became her way of expressing the emotions she couldn't always put into words. John watched with pride as his daughters pursued their dreams, but with each passing year, he grew more aware of his own mortality. His health, once robust, began to falter, and he found himself visiting the doctor more often than he cared to admit. But despite the challenges, John had no regrets. He had given the girls a home, but they had given him something far more precious, a family. Life's unforeseen trials. As the years passed, John Harris witnessed his daughters grow into remarkable young women. Each day, he marveled at the way they had blossomed, thriving despite the odds stacked against them. But as the girls stepped into adulthood, John's own journey began to take a different path, one marked by physical weakness and the creeping sense of mortality that had begun to haunt his once vibrant life. It had started with small things. At first, John dismissed the fatigue he felt after a long day at work or the occasional dizzy spell when he got up too fast. He attributed it to age. After all, he wasn't the young officer he had once been, and raising 6 girls on his own wasn't exactly a walk in the park. His friends at the station had joked about how fatherhood had aged him, and John had always laughed it off. But deep down, he knew something more serious was happening. His body wasn't just tired, it was failing him. He could feel it in his bones, the way his joints ached at the end of the day, the way his breath grew short after walking up a flight of stairs. He was getting weaker, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep up with the demands of life. Amara, the oldest and always the most observant, noticed first. "Dad, you need to see a doctor," she said one evening as they sat on the front porch together. The other girls were scattered around the house, lost in their own worlds, but Amara never missed an opportunity to sit with John and talk. It had become their tradition since she'd left for college. John waved her off with a dismissive hand, his weathered face breaking into a small smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just getting old. Comes with the territory." But Amara wasn't so easily convinced. She had seen him struggle with things that used to come so naturally to him. The way he held his chest after a particularly long day. The way he seemed to need more rest than usual. As much as John tried to hide it, his health was deteriorating. "No, Dad," Amara insisted, her eyes filled with concern. You're not fine. You've been pushing yourself too hard for too long. Please, just get checked out. If not for yourself, then for us." John looked into her eyes, seeing the same fierce determination that had always been a part of her. She had grown into a formidable woman, a law student with a passion for justice, and now she was using that fire to protect him. He nodded slowly, knowing she wouldn't let it go until he promised. "All right," he sighed. "I'll make an appointment." A diagnosis that shook them all. The diagnosis came a few weeks later. Heart failure. John sat in the sterile doctor's office, the beeping of monitors and the rustle of papers filling the silence as the doctor explained the details. It was a degenerative condition, one that had progressed slowly over the years without him realizing it. There were treatments, of course, medications to manage the symptoms, lifestyle changes that could help prolong his life. But there was no cure. The reality hit him like a ton of bricks. John wasn't afraid of dying. He had seen enough of life to know that death was a part of it, and he had long come to terms with his own mortality. But the thought of leaving his daughters behind, of not being there to see them fully realize their potential, was almost unbearable. When he returned home that evening, the weight of the diagnosis hung heavy in the air. He hadn't told the girls yet, not wanting to burden them with the news just yet. But Amara, always perceptive, knew something was wrong the moment he walked through the door. "Dad," she asked cautiously as he sat down at the kitchen table, "what did the doctor say?" John sighed deeply, running a hand through his thinning hair. "It's not good, sweetheart." The other girls began to gather in the kitchen as well, sensing the seriousness of the moment. Maya and Leela paused their workout in the backyard. Jada closed her laptop from where she had been studying at the dining room table. Tessa set her guitar aside. And Zoe, the youngest, perched silently at the edge of the table, her wide eyes fixed on John. He took a deep breath, feeling the overwhelming sense of love he had for each of them. "I've been diagnosed with heart failure," he said softly. "It's been going on for a while. And, well, there's no real cure. I'll need to slow down, take medication, and we'll see how it goes." The silence that followed was deafening. The girls stared at him, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and sorrow. For a moment, no one spoke. Amara was the first to break the silence. "What does this mean? How serious is it?" John didn't sugarcoat it. He had always believed in telling the girls the truth, no matter how hard it was. "It's serious," he admitted, "but I've still got time. I just need to be careful." The room was quiet again, the weight of the news sinking in. John watched his daughters' faces, seeing the same emotions he had felt when the doctor first told him. Fear, uncertainty, the sense that life was changing in ways they couldn't control. But then something shifted. Maya, always the energetic one, stood up straight, her voice filled with a steely resolve. "We're not going to let this take you down, Dad. We've been through worse, and we'll get through this too. You've been there for us every single day of our lives, and now it's our turn to take care of you." John's heart swelled with pride. These girls, his girls, had grown into strong, resilient women. They had faced so much adversity in their lives, and yet they stood before him, unyielding in their love and support. A family rallies together. From that day forward, the dynamic in the Harris household shifted. The girls, once scattered by their own busy lives, now rallied together in a way John hadn't expected. They took turns caring for him, making sure he took his medications, attending his doctor's appointments, and even adjusting their schedules to spend more time at home. Amara, despite her demanding law school schedule, came home every weekend. Maya and Leela, who had both received athletic scholarships to nearby universities, balanced their training with visits to check in on their father. Tessa, who had begun performing at local venues, started dedicating their songs to John, bringing music into the house that lifted everyone's spirits. Jada, the academic star, took on the role of family researcher, diving into every piece of medical literature she could find to ensure her dad was receiving the best possible care. And Zoe, now a talented young artist, used her sketches to capture moments of their time together, filling the house with drawings that celebrated their love for one another. John was overwhelmed by their devotion. He had always known that he had done his best as a father, but to see the way his daughters had grown into compassionate, selfless women filled him with a sense of accomplishment he couldn't put into words. But their efforts didn't stop at home. The girls had bigger plans in mind, something that would truly repay John for all he had done for them. Amara's plan. It was Amara who spearheaded the plan, her legal mind always thinking 10 steps ahead. One evening, she gathered her sisters around the dining room table while John was resting in the living room. "We need to do more than just take care of Dad," Amara said, her voice firm. "He's always been there for us, given us everything. Now it's time we give something back." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Like what? What more can we do?" Amara smiled, her eyes twinkling with the same fire that had made her a star in her law school classes. "I've been thinking about how much Dad has sacrificed for us over the years. He's given us a home, a family, and a future. I want to make sure he knows how much that means to us." Tessa, ever the dreamer, leaned forward. "What do you have in mind?" Amara pulled out a folder from her bag, spreading the papers across the table. "I've been working with some people in town. You all know how much Dad loves this community, how much he's done for it. I want to start something in his name. A foundation." Jada's eyes lit up. "A foundation? Like a charity?" Amara nodded. "Exactly. I've been working on the legal side of things, and I think we can set up a scholarship fund for kids in foster care. We all know how tough the system can be, and Dad has always been about helping those who need it the most. This would be our way of continuing his legacy." The room buzzed with excitement as the sisters discussed the details. Maya and Leela offered to organize fundraising events through their college athletic connections. Tessa suggested holding benefit concerts where she could perform and raise awareness. Jada and Zoe would handle the creative side, designing logos, promotional materials, and building a website to spread the word. The plan was ambitious, but the girls were determined. They wanted John to see that his love, his sacrifices, had not gone unnoticed. They wanted to show him that the seeds he had planted in their lives had grown into something far bigger than any of them had imagined. A legacy of love. The following months were a whirlwind of activity in the Harris household. The sisters, determined to honor their father's sacrifices, worked tirelessly to bring Amara's vision of the foundation to life. Their dedication was palpable, not only because they wanted to give back to their father, but because they understood that this foundation represented something larger than themselves. It was about continuing the values John had instilled in them. John had always taught his daughters that love wasn't just a feeling, it was an action, a commitment to making a difference in the lives of others. He had embodied that philosophy when he took them in as frightened, abandoned children, and now they wanted to make sure his legacy would continue to inspire others long after he was gone. The idea of a foundation, born in the quiet kitchen discussions among the sisters, quickly gained traction. Amara, with her law school connections, secured pro bono legal help to establish the organization. She drafted the necessary documents, filed the paperwork, and met with local officials to ensure that the foundation was legitimate and could operate as a recognized charitable entity. Maya and Leela, both standout athletes, used their connections in the sports world to organize charity runs, athletic events, and community outreach programs, raising awareness for their cause. Tessa, ever the musician, began organizing benefit concerts, bringing local talent and big names alike to perform and raise funds. Jada and Zoe took charge of the creative aspects. Jada, the academic genius, worked on the foundation's public relations strategy, ensuring that their mission statement, supporting children in foster care and adoption, particularly in communities of color, was at the forefront of every communication. Zoe, whose artistic talent had flourished over the years, designed the foundation's logo, a tree with deep roots, symbolizing the unbreakable bond of family and growth. The branches of the tree reached outward, extending into hands that held up smaller seedlings, a powerful visual metaphor for the Foundation's mission, to help nurture and support the next generation of children in need. The name of the foundation was simple but poignant, the Harris Home Foundation. It was a reflection of the home John had created for his daughters, but also a beacon for the thousands of children in foster care who were waiting for a place to call home. Unveiling the foundation. The day of the foundation's official unveiling was a warm, sunny Saturday in late spring. The entire town of Maple Creek had been buzzing with excitement for weeks. The event was set to take place in the town square, where a large stage had been erected. Banners with the Harris Home Foundation logo adorned the streets, and local businesses had donated food, drinks, and raffle prizes to support the cause. The sisters had worked tirelessly to organize every detail, and now, as the day finally arrived, they stood together, watching the fruits of their labor unfold. John, however, had no idea what was about to happen. The girls had kept everything a secret from him, insisting only that he needed to attend an important community event. As always, John had been reluctant to leave the house, his health still fragile, but Amara had been firm. "Dad, you've spent your whole life working for this town. Today's about giving something back. You need to be there." And so John had agreed, though he still wasn't sure what all the fuss was about. As they walked toward the town square, John could hear the buzz of the crowd gathering, the sound of children's laughter, and the low hum of anticipation in the air. When they arrived, John was stunned. The entire town had turned out for the event. Hundreds of people milled about, some wearing shirts with the foundation's logo, others holding signs that read "Support Foster Care" and "Harris Home Foundation, where every child deserves a family." What is this?" John asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Amara smiled, her heart swelling with pride as she saw the look of confusion and awe on her father's face. "This is for you, Dad." Before John could ask more, Maya took his arm and guided him toward the stage. "You'll see, Dad. Just wait." As they reached the stage, the crowd began to cheer. John could see familiar faces, old friends from the police force, families he had helped over the years, neighbors, and even strangers. The love and admiration pouring from the crowd was overwhelming. On stage, Amara stepped forward, a microphone in her hand. The cheering subsided, and the crowd grew quiet as she began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today," Amara said, her voice clear and strong. "We're here to celebrate something very special. 20 years ago, a man made a decision that changed the lives of 6 girls, my sisters and me. When we lost our parents, we were scared, lost, and alone. But that man, Officer John Harris, gave us something we thought we'd never have again. He gave us a home. He became our father, our protector, and our greatest supporter. He sacrificed everything for us, his time, his energy, his heart. And he did it all without asking for anything in return." John's eyes welled with tears as Amara spoke. He had never seen himself as a hero, but hearing his daughter speak about him in this way, in front of the entire town, filled him with a deep sense of gratitude and humility. Amara continued, "Today, we want to honor that sacrifice. But we also want to make sure that the love and support our father showed us can be extended to other children in need. That's why we're proud to announce the creation of the Harris Home Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting children in foster care, especially in communities of color. Our mission is simple: to give every child the chance to find a loving, supportive home, just like we did." The crowd erupted in applause, but Amara wasn't finished. She turned to John, her eyes glistening with tears. "Dad, this foundation is our way of saying thank you. Thank you for giving us a family, for teaching us the meaning of love, for showing us that we are worthy of happiness and success. This is your legacy, and we promise to carry it forward, to make sure that your love touches the lives of as many children as possible." John could barely speak. The emotion of the moment overwhelmed him, and all he could do was nod, tears streaming down his face. The girls gathered around him, each placing a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and love. The ripple effect. The unveiling of the Harris Home Foundation sparked something extraordinary in Maple Creek. In the weeks and months that followed, the foundation grew beyond anything the girls had anticipated. Donations poured in, not just from local businesses, but from individuals and corporations across the state. The girls' story of their father's selfless decision to adopt 6 black girls and raise them in a small, predominantly white town resonated with people far and wide. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, the Harris family was being interviewed by major networks, sharing their journey and the mission of the foundation. John, who had always been a humble private man, found himself thrust into the spotlight. It was uncomfortable for him at first, but as he saw the positive impact the foundation was having, he began to embrace his new role. He became an advocate for foster care reform, speaking at events and fundraisers, sharing his experience of raising his daughters, and calling on others to step up and provide loving homes for children in need. Meanwhile, the girls continued their work, each contributing in their own way. Amara led the legal and administrative side of the foundation, ensuring that it remained financially transparent and accountable. Maya and Leela organized sports events that brought communities together, raising both money and awareness for the cause. Tessa used her platform as a musician to advocate for foster care, performing at benefit concerts across the country. Jada worked on expanding the foundation's reach through social media and public relations, while Zoe's art became the visual identity of the foundation. Her designs featured on everything from promotional materials to murals painted in foster care centers across the state. The Harris Home Foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for children in foster care, particularly black children who often faced additional challenges in finding permanent homes. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and resources for foster children and adoptive families, making a tangible difference in the lives of countless individuals. John's final gift as the foundation grew, so did John's pride in his daughters. Though his health continued to decline, he found peace in knowing that the girls were carrying on his legacy, that the love he had given them was now being passed on to others. One evening, as John sat on the porch with Amara, watching the sun set over the hills of Maple Creek, he smiled. "I never thought things would turn out like this," he said softly. Amara glanced at him, her heart full. "Neither did we, Dad, but we're so glad they did." John nodded, his eyes drifting to the horizon. "You girls have given me more than I ever could have asked for. I'm proud of each of you. You've turned my life into something beautiful." Amara squeezed his hand. "We're the ones who are proud of you, Dad. You gave us a family when we had nothing. Now we're just doing the same for others." John smiled, his heart full, knowing that his legacy would live on, not just in his daughters, but in the countless lives that the Harris Home Foundation would touch. A father's final days, as the Harris Home Foundation continued to grow and impact lives across the country, John Harris found himself living in a state of deep gratitude. The daughters he had once feared would never fully trust or accept him were now his greatest source of pride and strength. He had built a legacy of love, one that extended far beyond the walls of their home. Yet despite the joy that surrounded him, John's health continued to decline. Every day was a little harder than the last. But in true John Harris fashion, he kept his focus on what mattered most: his daughters and the work they were doing to change the lives of children just like them. The girls, now grown women with lives of their own, began to spend more time at home. Amara, ever the determined eldest daughter, cut back on her demanding law school schedule to stay closer to her father. Maya and Leela, who were rising stars in their athletic careers, juggled their training schedules to ensure they could spend weekends and evenings with John. Tessa, who had been touring with her band, canceled performances and returned home, while Jada and Zoe, the youngest of the 6, devoted themselves to keeping the house running and ensuring their father had everything he needed. John could feel the weight of his daughter's concern, but he refused to let it overshadow the joy he felt in seeing them rally together. He had raised them to be independent, strong, and capable, and now they were using those traits to care for him, even as his strength faded. One evening, as the family sat together around the dinner table, a scene that had become increasingly rare as the girls grew older, John watched them laugh and talk, their voices overlapping in a symphony of memories and shared experiences. Amara was recounting a particularly challenging case she was working on at law school, while Maya and Leela teased Tessa about her latest song, which had become a viral hit online. John smiled, content to be a quiet observer in this moment of togetherness. The pain in his chest, which had been his constant companion for months now, was almost bearable as he listened to his daughters. They were everything he had hoped they would become: smart, driven, compassionate women who had found their own paths in life. After dinner, Amara and Tessa helped clear the table, while the younger girls sat with John on the porch, watching the stars begin to emerge in the evening sky. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, one that felt almost suspended in time. Zoe, who had always been the most artistic and introspective of the sisters, broke the silence. "Dad, have you ever thought about what happens after all this?" John turned to look at her, his eyes soft but tired. "After I'm gone?" he asked gently. Zoe nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Joda, sitting beside her, looked uncomfortable but listened intently. The question had been on all their minds for some time, but Zoe had always been the one to ask the hard questions. John leaned back in his chair, the cool night air soothing against his skin. "I've thought about it a lot," he admitted. "I don't know exactly what happens, but I do know one thing. I'm not afraid." The girls were silent, waiting for him to continue. "When I took you girls in, I didn't know what the future would hold," John said, his voice soft but steady. "I didn't know if I'd be a good father, or if you'd ever feel at home with me. But looking at you now, I know that every struggle, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it was all worth it. I've already lived my life, and the best part of that life was being your father." Jetta, ever the practical one, spoke next. "But what about the foundation? What happens if you're not here to help us anymore?" John smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You girls don't need me to keep that going. You've already done so much on your own. You've turned this foundation into something far bigger than I ever imagined. And I know you'll continue to grow it. The Harris Home Foundation isn't about me. It's about the love we built as a family. It's about helping others, and that will live on long after I'm gone." Zoe, who had been quietly sketching in her notebook, looked up at her father, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm scared, Dad. I don't know if we can do this without you." John reached over, taking her hand in his. "You can. You've already proven that. You're strong, Zoe. All of you are. I won't be here physically, but I'll always be with you, in everything you do, every decision you make, every life you touch. I'll be there." It was a sentiment that John believed wholeheartedly. His daughters had surpassed every expectation he'd ever had for them. They had grown into women of substance and character, and even in his absence, he knew they would continue to carry the torch. The farewell he didn't expect. As the weeks passed, John's health took a sharp decline. His once occasional chest pains became constant, and his energy levels plummeted. Despite this, he remained adamant about attending the next major fundraising event for the foundation, an event that Maya and Leela had worked tirelessly to organize. It was to be held at a large athletic stadium in the city, with all proceeds going to the Harris Home Foundation. The girls had invited several prominent athletes and entertainers to participate, and it had become a highly anticipated event. John insisted on attending, despite the objections of his daughters, who feared the strain it would put on him. But John was determined. This event represented everything they had worked for, and he wanted to see the fruits of their labor firsthand. The day of the event was warm and clear, and the stadium was packed with supporters. Athletes from around the state had come to participate in a charity run, while local musicians, including Tessa, performed throughout the day. The energy was electric, and as John sat in the VIP section, flanked by his daughters, he felt a profound sense of pride. As the event unfolded, Amara took the stage to deliver a speech. She spoke eloquently about the mission of the foundation, the importance of supporting foster care and adoption, and the work they were doing to ensure that every child had a chance at a loving home. And none of this, she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, would be possible without our father, John Harris. He showed us what it means to love unconditionally, to give without expecting anything in return, and to stand up for what's right. This foundation is his legacy, and we are honored to continue that legacy in his name. The crowd erupted in applause, but John could hardly hear it. His vision blurred, and a wave of exhaustion washed over him. He tried to stand, to join his daughters on stage, but his legs gave out beneath him. "Dad." Maya was at his side in an instant, her arms around him as he collapsed into his seat. The rest of the girls rushed over, panic flashing in their eyes. "I'm okay," John whispered, though he knew it wasn't true. His body was failing him, faster than he had anticipated. Paramedics were called, and John was rushed to the hospital, his daughters following close behind. As he lay in the hospital bed, surrounded by the steady beeping of machines, he knew his time was near. The last goodbye. In the quiet hours of the night, John's daughters gathered around his bed. The hospital room was dimly lit, the only sound the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Amara, Mia, Leela, Tessa, Jeddah, and Zoe stood in silence, their faces etched with worry and grief. John looked at each of them, his heart full of love. He had always known this moment would come, but he hadn't anticipated how peaceful he would feel. "You don't have to be afraid," John said softly, his voice weak but steady. "I've lived a good life, and the best part of that life was being your father." Amara, who had always been the strong one, the protector, finally let her tears fall. "We're going to miss you so much, Dad." John smiled, his eyes filled with love. "I'll always be with you. In every laugh, every success, every challenge, you'll feel me there." One by one, the girls leaned in to kiss their father's forehead, each whispering their goodbyes. They were heartbroken, but they also understood that this was not the end. John's love would live on in them, and through the foundation that would continue to change lives. As John closed his eyes for the final time, his daughters held his hands, their hearts full of both sorrow and gratitude. He had given them a life they never thought possible, and now they would carry on his legacy in a way that would touch the lives of countless others. John Harris passed peacefully that night, surrounded by the love he had spent a lifetime nurturing. A life remembered. John's funeral was held in Maple Creek, in the same small town where he had raised his daughters and built his life. The entire community turned out to honor him. Neighbors, colleagues, friends, and even strangers whose lives had been touched by his kindness. The church was filled with flowers and pictures of John with his daughters, each image a testament to the love he had given so freely. The girls, though heartbroken, stood tall as they spoke at the service, each one sharing a memory of their father, of the lessons he had taught them, the sacrifices he had made, and the love that had shaped their lives. Amara, as the eldest, spoke last. "My father taught us that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about showing up for the people who need you most. He didn't just give us a home. He gave us the courage to become who we were meant to be. And though he's no longer with us, we know that his spirit lives on. In us, in this community, and in the foundation that will continue to change lives in his name." After the service, as the crowd filed out of the church, the girls stood together, arms wrapped around one another. Though their father was gone, they knew that his legacy would continue in the work they did, in the lives they touched, and in the love they carried forward. John Harris had built something far greater than he ever realized, And now, it was up to his daughters to ensure that legacy would never fade, carrying the torch forward. In the months following John Harris' passing, his daughters found themselves grappling with the vast void his absence left behind. His presence had been the glue that bound them together as children, and now, as adults, they faced the challenge of navigating life without his steady guidance. But if there was one thing their father had taught them, it was that love, true, unwavering love, transcends time, distance, and even death. The Harris Home Foundation, now a thriving entity, became the daughters' collective lifeline. Each of the 6 sisters had always taken pride in the work they did for the foundation. But after their father's death, the foundation became not only a tribute to his life, but also a way for them to heal and continue carrying his legacy forward. The foundation wasn't just about foster care and adoption anymore. It was about family, resilience, and showing others that no matter where they came from, they deserved a home filled with love. A new vision for the foundation. After the funeral, Amara called a family meeting. The sisters gathered in the living room of their childhood home, a house that still smelled of John's aftershave and the home-cooked meals he had lovingly prepared for them. The walls, adorned with family photos and Zoe's artwork, felt like a living tribute to their father's devotion. Amara, always the leader among them, cleared her throat. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad's legacy and how we can take the foundation to the next level," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Dad gave us so much: love, security, and the belief that no matter what, we belonged somewhere. I think it's time we take that message further." The sisters nodded, each one knowing that the foundation had already grown beyond their wildest dreams, but they also knew that Amara had a vision that could push it even further. "What are you thinking, Mara?" Maya asked, always eager to take action. "I've been talking with some of my contacts in the legal world, and I think it's time we expand the foundation's reach nationally, even globally," Amara explained, her voice gaining confidence. "We've already done so much locally, but there are children all over the country and the world who need what we're offering. We need to be there for them too." Leela, who had always been focused on the logistics, chimed in. "Expanding like that would take a lot of resources. Do we have the backing for something that big?" Tessa, ever the dreamer and optimist, smiled. "We'll find a way. We've gotten this far, haven't we?" Jada, who had spent the past few months delving deep into the foundation's finances and growth potential, nodded thoughtfully. "We've actually been getting more donations and attention than we know what to do with. I've been talking to some corporate sponsors who are interested in partnering with us to create more scholarship programs and mentorship opportunities. If we play our cards right, we can definitely make this happen." Zoe, the youngest, who had always been the most artistic and creative of the bunch, spoke up. "I've been thinking about Dad's message too. He didn't just give us a home. He taught us about identity, about finding our place in a world that didn't always accept us. I think the foundation could do more to focus on that. We could create programs that help foster kids, especially kids of color, understand their heritage, their culture, and give them the tools to embrace who they are." Amara smiled proudly at her youngest sister. "Exactly. That's what Dad would have wanted. He didn't just give us a house. He gave us the strength to be who we are, even in the face of adversity. And that's the message we need to spread." And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, the Harris sisters set to work expanding the foundation. Each sister took on a role that reflected her unique skills and passions. Amara, as always, led the legal and strategic initiatives. Maya and Leela, using their connections in the athletic world, began organizing national charity runs, marathons, and sports events to raise awareness and funds. Tessa continued her benefit concerts, with plans to tour internationally and spread the foundation's message through music. Jada, with her brilliant mind, managed the logistics, finances, and partnerships. And Zoe, with her artistic touch, transformed the foundation's branding, creating powerful campaigns that highlighted the stories of foster children and adoptees from diverse backgrounds. Expanding horizons. The first major step in expanding the foundation was opening new chapters across the country. Amara, with her legal expertise, navigated the complex bureaucratic hurdles involved in establishing the Harris Home Foundation in major cities like Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta, and Chicago. Each chapter was designed to cater to the specific needs of the local foster care communities. In some cities, this meant focusing on increasing adoption rates for children of color, while in others, the foundation emphasized providing mental health services and mentorship programs for kids who were aging out of the system. One of the most groundbreaking initiatives came from Zoe's vision. She wanted to focus on cultural education and identity for children in foster care, particularly those who, like her and her sisters, had grown up in environments where they didn't always feel like they fit in. Working with cultural experts, historians, and educators, Zoe developed a program called Roots of Home, which provided children in foster care with resources to learn about their cultural heritage and connect with their community. The program offered everything from African dance classes and historical tours to language lessons and mentorship from successful individuals in their communities. Dad always said we needed to know where we came from in order to know where we're going, Zoe said during the launch event for the program. This is our way of helping kids find their roots, no matter where they come from. The program was an immediate success, and soon chapters across the country began implementing Roots of Home as part of their offerings. Maya and Leela, meanwhile, spearheaded the foundation's expansion into sports mentorship. They partnered with professional athletes and teams to create after-school programs for foster kids, teaching them not only athletic skills, but also teamwork, discipline, and the confidence to pursue their dreams. I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for sports, Maya said during one of the foundation's televised events. It taught me how to push through the hardest challenges, and I want to make sure kids in foster care have the same opportunities to find their strength and passion. As the foundation expanded, so did its reach. National media outlets began covering the incredible work the Harris sisters were doing, and soon, celebrities, influencers, and corporations were eager to support their mission. Major partnerships with brands like Nike, Disney, and Google provided the financial backing necessary to take the foundation global. Going global. With the foundation thriving across the United States, Amara and her sisters set their sights on the international stage. They knew that foster care challenges weren't unique to the U.S., and that children around the world faced similar struggles. Working with international adoption agencies, NGOs, and government officials, they launched the foundation's first global initiative. The global expansion began with 2 countries, South Africa and Brazil, places where children in foster care faced significant cultural and economic challenges. Amara traveled to South Africa to meet with local leaders and foster care advocates, establishing partnerships that would allow the foundation to provide not only financial support, but also cultural mentorship programs similar to those they had developed in the U.S. Meanwhile, Jeddah worked on creating a digital platform that would connect foster children and adoptive families around the world, making it easier for children to find homes in countries where adoption laws and processes were often complex and opaque. Dad always said that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, Jada said during the launch of the global platform. And love doesn't have borders. We want to make sure that every child, no matter where they are, has the chance to find a family who loves them. Honoring John Harris's legacy. As the foundation continued to grow, the Harris sisters made a point of honoring their father's legacy in every new initiative they launched. They hosted an annual John Harris Memorial Gala, an event that brought together leaders from the foster care community, celebrities, and supporters from around the world. Each year, the gala raised millions of dollars for the foundation, allowing them to continue their work and expand into new regions. But more than the financial success, the gala was a celebration of the values John Harris had instilled in his daughters: love, kindness, and the belief that everyone deserves a family. The sisters always made sure to highlight stories of the children whose lives had been transformed by the foundation. Children who, like them, had once felt lost and unwanted, but had found hope and belonging through the Harris Home Foundation. One year, the keynote speaker was a young man named Marcus, a former foster child who had grown up in one of the foundation's mentorship programs. Marcus had faced incredible adversity as a child, bouncing from one foster home to another, never feeling like he truly belonged anywhere. But through the foundation, he had found a mentor who changed his life. Now he was a successful entrepreneur, and he stood on the stage at the gala, sharing his story with tears in his eyes. "I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the Harris Home Foundation," Marcus said, his voice cracking with emotion. "John Harris didn't just give his daughters a home. He gave all of us one, and I'm forever grateful." A legacy that lives on. Years passed, and the Harris Home Foundation continued to flourish. The sisters, now with families of their own, continued to lead the charge, each one contributing in her unique way to the foundation's mission. They traveled the world, sharing their story, advocating for children in need, and ensuring that John Harris's legacy of love would never be forgotten. And though John was no longer with them, his spirit remained a constant presence in their lives. Every time they launched a new initiative, every time they saw a child find a loving home, they could feel his pride and his love surrounding them. As Amara stood on the stage at one of the foundation's many events, she looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces from all walks of life, united in their support of the foundation's mission. She smiled, knowing that her father's dream had come true. "Family isn't just about blood," she said, echoing the words John had once told them. "It's about love. And love can change the world." The Harris Home Foundation had done just that. End of the story.